The sinking of the Lancastria on June 17, 1940, remains one of the darkest chapters in British maritime history. A catastrophic event shrouded in secrecy, the loss of life aboard the ship was immense. While often overshadowed by other tragedies of the Second World War, the Lancastria disaster continues to haunt the nation's collective memory. In today's newest Maritime Mishaps deep dive, let's take a closer inspection of the trials and terrifying tragedies aboard the HMT Lancastria. The HMT Lancastria was initially conceived as a passenger liner named Tirrenia. Constructed in the Scottish shipyard of William Beardmore and Company along the River Clyde, it was a grand vessel designed for transatlantic voyages. Launched in 1920, it was a twin to the RMS Cameronia, also a product of Beardmore's skilled craftsmanship. Owned by Anchor Line, a subsidiary of the renowned Cunard Shipping Company, the Tirrenia was a substantial ship, measuring 578 feet in length and capable of carrying over 2,000 passengers across various levels of comfort. Its maiden journey in 1922 took it to the Scottish city of Glasgow, to the Canadian metropolises of Quebec City and Montreal, marking the beginning of a life destined to change dramatically with the onset of war. Initially christened Tirrenia, the vessel faced challenges due to the complexity of its name. Passengers frequently encountered difficulties pronouncing it, and crew members often adopted the informal moniker Old Soup Tureen. In response to the mounting complaints, the ship underwent a transformation in 1924, emerging with the new name Lancastria. Following its renaming, the Lancastria continued to traverse the waters between Liverpool and New York until 1932. Subsequently, its role shifted as it embarked on voyages exploring the Mediterranean and northern European coastlines. A notable chapter in the ship's history took place on October 10, 1932, when it played a heroic part in rescuing the crew of the stricken Belgian cargo ship Sheldestad, which had sustained severe damage in the perilous Bay of Biscay. Demonstrating its versatility, the Lancastria also catered to a diverse clientele. In 1934, it hosted the Catholic Boy Scouts of Ireland on a pilgrimage to Rome. 2 years later, in May 1936, the ship undertook a special commission, visiting war memorials in Malta, Salonika, Gallipoli, and Istanbul. This particular voyage was distinguished by the presence of prominent military figures, including Admiral of the Fleet Roger Keyes, Field Marshal William Birdwood, and Commodore Edward Unwin. With the onset of World War II in September 1939, the Lancastria was stationed in the Bahamas. Subsequently ordered to New York, the vessel underwent a substantial transformation from military service. Requisitioned as a troopship and renamed HMT Lancastria, the ship was stripped of non-essential components and painted in a somber battleship gray. To conceal its presence, portholes were darkened and a 4-inch gun was installed. At first, the Lancastria transported personnel and supplies between Canada and the United Kingdom. In April 1940, it participated in Operation Alphabet, an evacuation of troops from Norway. Despite an aerial attack during the return voyage, the ship made it to the other side without as much as a scratch. Following this, the Lancastria played a role in reinforcing the invasion of Iceland. Upon returning to Glasgow, the ship's captain requested the removal of excess oil from its tanks. However, due to pressing time constraints, this task was deferred as the vessel was immediately dispatched to Liverpool for further modifications. As a result of these changes, some crew members were released from duty or granted leave. And for those few fortunate souls, it was a decision that would spare their life. In the middle of June 1940, just a couple of weeks removed from the D-Day invasion of Normandy, the Lancastria would depart on its final mission. Having recently docked in Liverpool, the Lancastria was abruptly summoned back to sea. Through announcements broadcast at the main railway station, most crew members were quickly reunited with the ship. On June 15th, the Lancastria arrived in Plymouth, awaiting its next assignment. The vessel was subsequently dispatched to Quiberon Bay as part of Operation Ariel, a mission to rescue the remaining British Expeditionary Force soldiers. Numbering approximately 124,000, these troops, primarily engaged in logistical support, had been isolated by the advancing German army in France. Accompanying the Lancastria on this endeavor was the 20,341-ton liner Franconia. Initially destined for Lorient, the Lancastria was redirected to Saint Nazaire when its services were no longer required at the former location. Captain Rudolph Sharp received orders to proceed to Saint Nazaire, where a substantial number of troops awaited evacuation. An air raid targeting the Franconia during the voyage compelled its return to England for repairs, leaving the Lancastria to complete the journey alone. Arriving at the mouth of the Loire estuary late on June 16th, the Lancastria anchored at Charpentier Roads, approximately 5 miles southwest of Saint Nazaire, at 4 a.m. on June 17th. There, it joined a fleet composed of around 30 merchant ships of varying sizes. Later that same morning, a trio of naval officers boarded the Lancastria to assess its passenger capacity. Designed to accommodate about 2,180 individuals, including crew, the ship's configuration as a troop carrier presented limitations. However, given the captain's previous success in transporting 2,600 men from Norway, he asserted the ship could carry 3,000 people in cramped conditions. The officers authorized the captain to embark as many people as possible, disregarding the official limits. Troops were then ferried to the Lancastria and other larger vessels, using a variety of smaller boats. This process, lasting several hours per trip, was occasionally disrupted by German aircraft. Despite the aerial harassment, no casualties were reported. By the afternoon of June 17th, the Lancastria carried an undetermined number of passengers, estimated between 4,000 and 9,000. This diverse group included soldiers, airmen, and approximately 40 civilian refugees. Every available space, including the vast cargo holds, was occupied. One military officer claimed a loading official reported over 7,200 people aboard, while the captain estimated around 5,500. At 1:50 p.m., a German bomb struck the bridge of the nearby Orensay, a large passenger ship. Though unhindered, the Lancastria captain was advised to depart immediately by the commander of a British destroyer. Concerned about the absence of protective escort against potential submarine threats, the captain opted to await the Orensay before leaving. At 3:50 p.m., German bombers renewed their assault. Multiple bombs struck Lancastria. While some accounts suggest a bomb descended directly into the ship's funnel, contributing to its rapid sinking, an engineer below deck offered a different perspective. He described bombs impacting specific cargo holds and the ship's hull, causing significant damage to fuel tanks. Regardless of the exact points of impact, though, the vessel's stability was severely compromised. As the ship began to tilt, efforts were made to counterbalance the weight by shifting people to the opposite side. Unfortunately, this action exacerbated the imbalance, leading to an irreversible incline. Despite carrying 16 lifeboats and thousands of life jackets, many of these safety devices were damaged or rendered useless by the ship's precarious position. The first lifeboat launched encountered difficulties, requiring a second boat for rescue. Another lifeboat was damaged upon entry into the water. Tragically, countless individuals who jumped overboard met a fatal end upon impact with the ship's hull or due to the weight of their life jackets. As the Lancastria began its final descent, some survivors clung precariously to its hull. Accounts vary on whether these individuals sang patriotic songs, but it is certain their situation was dire. The ship vanished beneath the waves within 20 minutes of the initial attack, leaving little opportunity for rescue. Many perished in the icy waters, overwhelmed by the lack of life-saving equipment or suffocated by the thick oil slick. Historical records indicate that survivors were subjected to further danger from aerial attacks by the enemy. Rescue efforts were initiated by nearby Allied ships. A trawler named Cambridgeshire successfully saved hundreds of lives. The bravery of the trawler's crew, including those who repeatedly risked their lives to save drowning men under enemy fire, was commendable. Captain Sharp, who survived the Lancastria's sinking, later met a tragic fate while commanding another vessel, the RMS Laconia. Of the thousands aboard the Lancastria, just over 2,400 survived, with a small number still living as of 2011. Many families mourned the loss of loved ones serving with the British Expeditionary Force, as this disaster claimed approximately 1/3 of the force's total French casualties. The Lancastria rests beneath the waves, roughly 5 nautical miles south of a point near Saint Nazaire. A dedicated association has compiled a record of over 1,700 confirmed fatalities. Historians offer varying estimates of the total death toll, ranging from under 4,000 to potentially as high as 7,000. This uncertainty, shared by other maritime disasters like the sinking of the Goya, makes definitive comparisons challenging. Nonetheless, the Lancastria tragedy stands as a significant maritime loss of life in British history. This devastating loss of life aboard the Lancastria prompted immediate suppression of the news by British Prime Minister Winston Churchill. Employing a system designed to restrict information, Churchill justified the decision by citing other pressing news events. While intending to release the news later, the rapidly evolving situation in France overshadowed the matter, leading to an extended silence. Ironically, the first public mention of the tragedy came from a notorious Nazi propagandist. However, due to the broadcaster's dubious reputation, the claims were largely dismissed. The story eventually reached the public through American and then British news outlets, weeks after the event. Accompanying reports were harrowing photographs capturing the disaster's aftermath. These images were taken by a serviceman exempt from the usual restrictions on photography. Despite government efforts to conceal the truth, some survivors shared their experiences with local newspapers, providing first-hand accounts of the tragedy. Decades later, requests for additional information from government archives were denied, citing exemptions under the Freedom of Information Act. While some documents were released, the full extent of the government's knowledge about the Lancastria disaster remains shrouded in secrecy. The site of the Lancastria's final resting place has also not been officially designated as a war grave by the British government due to its location in French waters. To address this, the French government established protective measures around the wreck site in the early 21st century. A campaign was later launched to secure greater recognition for the Lancastria tragedy and its survivors. The aim was to have the wreck site officially designated as the aforementioned British war grave. However, the British government continues to maintain that this was impossible due to the wreck's location. Despite support from various political groups, the government argued that such a designation would be symbolic without offering tangible protection. While other significant maritime battle sites received war grave status, the Lancastria remains to be excluded. The British government later clarified its stance, acknowledging the French government's protective measures and asserting that the wreck site was already afforded the appropriate level of respect and protection. The Commonwealth War Graves Commission has records of over 1,800 soldiers who died, many of whom are buried in France. For those whose bodies were never found, memorials across the country bear their names. From the towering Dunkirk Memorial to smaller local tributes, the nation has sought to honor the fallen. Survivors of the Lancastria have played a crucial role in keeping the memory of the disaster alive. Formed in the aftermath of the war, the Lancastria Survivors Association has worked tirelessly to ensure that the tragedy is not forgotten. Through annual commemorations and advocacy, the association has helped to maintain public awareness of the Lancastria and its victims. Over the years, there have been efforts to create physical memorials to the ship and its crew. From the somber beauty of stained glass windows to plaques and statues, these tributes stand as poignant reminders of the disaster. The French government has also finally recognized the significance of the Lancastria by protecting the wreck site as a war grave. While the Lancastria disaster remains a painful chapter in history, the ongoing efforts to remember and honor its victims are a testament to the enduring human spirit. By preserving the memory of those who perished, we ensure that their sacrifice is never forgotten. Though the full extent of the tragedy may never be fully understood, it is essential to continue to learn from the past and to honor those who were lost. The Lancastria serves as a stark reminder of the immense human cost of war.